Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the tutorial. It seems like I always have something to go back to in every new video. This time we're gonna go back to our base model. When I was preparing this part of the tutorial, I realized that the updated add field was not getting updated because we never set the application up to update it. So to fix that, we are going to utilize a pre-decorator that TypeGoose provides. As you should already know, Mongo Schema has a pre and a post hook, which if you set them up, they will run before or after a specific operation such as save, update, find. For updated that, we're going to use a pre-decorator on the base model and listen to the find one and update operation. And the second argument is a function next. We're going to set this dot underscore update dot updated add to a new date, and we pass in date dot now, and then we call next so that the schema will continue the updating in our database. And we also have to make the base model to take in a generated type, and we pass the type in the pre, and we remove this unused document import. Next, we're going to go to our user model, and we're going to make that change real quick. And we're going to add the default user role of type user. So that's all the backtracking that we have to do. In this part, we're going to implement to-do. So go ahead and generate a to-do module and a to-do controller. We also need a to-do service. Alright, now we're gonna need some directories. Let's make a models directory, a view models directory. We're gonna need a file user model in models and we need a to-do level enum in models as well. Then we're gonna need user VM in view models, and a to-do params in view models. Right, we're gonna start with our to-do level enum. So we're gonna export an enum to-do level. So we're gonna have like 3 levels. This is like a priority levels of low, normal, and high. Next, to-do model is export class to-do extends base model. Let's pass in to-do. We're gonna have content of type string, a level of type to-do level, and is completed of type boolean. Now for content, let's decorate with prop and make sure we import it. It's going to be required of type true. So message is going to be content is required. And that's it for content. For level, it's going to be a prop enum of to-do level and a default of normal. And for is completed, it's going to be default to false. So all the new to-dos will be false. Just like user, we're going to need a static getter model, returns model type of to-do, and we're going to return a new to-do, get model for class, pass in to-do, and schema options. And let's import the schema options. Next, we're going to need a static getter model name, returns type string, and it's just going to be this model name. Now let's go to our Todo VM. It's going to be export class Todo VM extends base model VM, just like to-do, so it has content, level, and is completed. and we're gonna decorate these with API model property. And for the level, it's gonna be an enum. So let's use enum to array and pass in to do level. Next, to do params. So it's export class to do params. It's gonna be content, string, and an optional to do level. So this is like a request body that we use to create a to do. So content is going to be API model property, and level is going to be property optional, and it's going to be an enum. And I'm going to pass in an example of normal. Next, going to be to do service. So extends base service, passing type to do, and we need a constructor. We're going to inject the model, and we pass in the model name, and we get the user model, the to do model of model type to do. We also need the mapper service. In the constructor, we're going to call the super constructor of the parent. We're going to reassign the model to do model and the mapper to mapper service dot mapper. We're going to go to the to do module, and we're going to have to import the mongoose module, and we call the for feature to initialize our to do model with the name and the schema. Now let's go back to service. So in the service, all we need is just one function, create to do. It takes in the params, and it's going to return a promise of to do. So let's deconstruct the params to get the content and the level from the params. And we're going to instantiate a new to do with new this.model. We're going to assign the content, and we're going to check for the level. If the level is not null, then we're going to assign the level. If not, it's default to normal. And we're going to use a try catch block to call our create method on the base service and pass in new to do, and we just return result to JSON as to do. And if something went wrong, just throw an exception, and it's subtype internal server. That's it for our service. Now let's move on to the controller. First of all, let's change to do to to-dos, and let's add use tag decorator and pass in the model name. We're going to need a constructor. Let's inject our service. I'm going to add a map and isArray function from Lodash. We're going to need it later. Alright, so for service, we're going to need a full CRUD operation. So we're going to need a create. That takes in the params, and it's going to return a promise of Todo VM. Next, we're going to need a get. It's not taking anything in for now. It's going to return an array of Todo VM. Next update is going to take in a Todo VM and returns the Todo VM. Finally, we need a delete. It's going to take in the ID of type string, and it's going to return the promise of the Todo VM of the deleted one. Now let's start decorating. For create, it's going to be a post, and let's give it some responses. Now for the first one, the status is going to be created 201, and the type is going to be Todo VM. Now let's copy this, and now for the status is going to be bad request, and type API exception. Next, we're going to need the operation, so let's use our helper, get operation ID, pass in the module name and the operation. Now let's just copy all these decorators and paste it for the rest of the handlers. Right, for get, it's going to be a get decorator. The response status is going to be OK 200. The type is Todo VM, but it's going to be isArray, so isArray 2, and the operation is get all. Right, for update it's going to be put, and the response is going to be created. Everything is the same, change create to update, and for delete is delete. And for the path we're going to use a parameter ID, and the status is OK, and the operation is delete. Next, let's decorate the parameters as well. So for ID is going to be a param decorator, and we pass in ID. That ID has to match with the ID from the path. So it basically is request.params.id in express, and if you don't pass in anything, it's going to be request.params. And VM is going to be a body, it's request.body, and params is also a body. Alright, let's start implementing these methods. For create, let's deconstruct params and get the content. We're going to check for the content. If it's null, we're going to throw a bad request exception. Next, we're going to use the try catch block and call the createtodo in our user service. In our to-do service. Just instantiate a new to-do, and we call createtodo. Pass in the VM, the params, and we're going to return the mapping result of the map method. And we map it from to-do to to-do VM. And now we're going to have to go to the mapper service to create a map from to-do to to-do VM. So to-do and to-do VM is the same thing. We don't ignore anything from to-do in to-do VM, but we're going to have to create a map for it as well. And I'm going to ignore the underscore ID because that's get returns with the ID getters on the Mongoose schema. So we're going to just ignore the underscore ID. And we're going to have to create a map for the array as well. Alright, so I forgot to implement the catch here. We're going to skip the get, and we're going to go to the update. Now let's deconstruct the VM and get the ID, content, level, and is completed from the VM. We're going to check if VM is null, and if ID is null, we're going to throw an exception, missing parameters. Then we're going to check if there's any existing to do with the ID. So file by ID and pass in the ID. If there's no existing, we're going to throw a not found exception. Next, we're going to check for the is completed. So if a to-do is already completed, we're going to throw an exception. We don't allow update a completed to-do. If everything goes alright, we reassign the value of the assist to the VM that we pass in. So content is completed and the level. After that, we use try catch block, and we're going to call the update method on the service. Passing the ID and the assist, and we're going to return the mapping result from Todo to Todo VM. And we're going to throw a internal server error exception. Right, now let's move on to delete. Delete is going to be really simple. Just a try catch block in here. The try catch block is going to check for the file or null ID as well. So that's all we need. So we just call the delete method on Todo service and pass in the ID. Then we return the mapping result from Todo to Todo VM. And throw an exception as users. Now let's go back to our get. For now, it's just gonna be like delete, so just try catch, and we're gonna return the to-dos, and we're gonna call the find all method and just return the mapping result of that. And now we're going to use the map from Lodash. I mean, you can just use the map on the array, but I just like utilizing Lodash. And then is array, so we pass in true, or else we're going to throw an exception. All right. Now our controller is basically like halfway done. Now let's start our application. Make sure you have MongoD running, and start the application, and let's check out the browser. You can see that we have the to-dos endpoints now on the Swagger UI. Let's try get. So it returns an empty array because I don't have any to-dos in my database right now. So let's create some to-dos. For the first one, it's going to be first to-do, and let's keep the level normal. You can see it's been added. Now let's add 4 more. Second to-do, low. Third to-do, it's going to be high. Fourth to-do, it's going to be low. And fifth to-do, and just get rid of that level, and you can see that the normal has been added to the level as default. Right, so that's add, great works. Let's get. It should be 5 of them. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Great, so get works as well. So let's grab an ID. Let's grab a fourth to-do ID so we can update it. It's from low. We're gonna update it, and we're gonna complete it as well. And pay attention to the updated at field. Let's pass in the ID for the ID field. The content is gonna be fourth to-do updated, and we changed it to normal, and it's completed. It's true. So let's execute. You can see that the updated add field has been updated, and we get returned the updated to-do. Now let's try to update it one more time. You get already completed, so you cannot update the already completed to-do. Now let's try retrieve to see if it's actually updated. Yes, it is. Now let's grab the first to do and we're gonna delete it. Let's call out delete and pass in the ID and let's call it. You get return the deleted to do, and let's try get again. Second, third, fourth, and fifth. First is gone. Alright, so CRUD is functioning, but I would like to add some filtering functionality to our get method. Right now you can get like all to-dos. So let's go back to VS Code. This is going to be tricky for Nest and Swagger module. First, we're going to add a level, optional level parameter to the get method, and it is of type to do level. We're going to decorate it with query decorator, and we pass in level. This behaves the same as request.param, so it's request.query.level. Now pay attention here, if you don't use Swagger, this is all you need. But if you use Swagger, you're going to need another decorator, and it is API implicit query. So the name is going to be level, it has to match, and requires false, because we set it to optional. It's going to be isArray, and collection format is multi. Now let's just console log level. Now rerun the application and goes back to Swagger. Let's refresh, and you can see now it takes in an optional level parameter, and we can add like multiple items. And even though we set it up as an enum, but Swagger module doesn't know the context of the enum, so it doesn't have any like values of our enum. I submitted a pull request for this one. I hope it will be merged. So we're gonna have to just leave with this right now until then. So remember our enum values is low, normal, and high. We're gonna have to pass it in exactly. So let's try low and high. Let's go back to VS Code. So it comes in as an array. Now let's try passing 1. It comes in as string. So we can handle both cases, but I would like to have it comes in as array only. So we can use the in operator for Mongoose. Now let's instantiate a filter as an empty object, and we pass that in the file. If level is not null, then we're going to append a level key to a filter object and set the value to an object that has the in operator, and we're going to check if level is an array using the isArray from Lodash. If it is an array, then we're going to use a spread operator. If it's not, we're going to put it in an array. So it always comes in as array. Now let's save and rerun our application. Now let's try. So first, let's just execute without any filter. We have 4 to-dos. Now let's try add a filter for low. You see it returns 1. Alright, high, it returns 1. Normal should be 2. Now let's normal and high, so it returns 3. Alright, cool. And normal and low is 3 as well. And then low and high should return 2 to-dos. Cool. Alright, so our level is working. And there's another edge case in Swagger module and Nest that I'm going to show you right now. You remember our to-do has a is completed boolean, and use case is if I want to query for an all high level to-dos that are completed. So we're gonna implement that right now. So let's go back to the code, and just like level, we're gonna add an is completed field, optional, of type boolean, and I'm gonna decorate it as well with query and pass in is completed. So for is completed, we don't need the API implicit query, but because Swagger module still set the field to be required even though we set it as optional, so that's why we're going to use the API implicit query to make it not required, because it can be null. You might want to query for both completed and non-completed to-dos, so that's why it's optional. So we're going to use the API implicit query. The name is completed and required false. Let's just console log the value right now, and I'm gonna console log the type of is completed as well. Let's see what we got. Let's rerun our application. Refresh. Let's try. Now you see we have another field. Let's try true. Alright, returns true, but the type is string. So what happened? We set up as a boolean. Alright, so it turns out the express request.query always return string. There are solutions out there that can help us to convert a string, a true string, to a boolean, but because we set up as a boolean, so we cannot do is completed a triple equal sign a string true to make it a true boolean. So what now? So Nest provides a feature called pipe, and we're going to use this pipe to transform the is completed value to a boolean. So let's stop our server, and under share let's create a directory called pipes, and under pipes let's create a pipe called toBoolean.pipe.ts. So a pipe is just a class, and it implements pipe transform. So pipe transform makes sure that this class implement a method called transform. Transform takes in a value of type any and a metadata. Metadata is like so what type it is, what handler it is, what class it is. So it's argument metadata. We're gonna need the type and the meta type from the metadata. So we're gonna deconstruct it from the parameter. And optionally, you can decorate it with injectable. So if you want to inject other services into this pipe, you can. First, we only want to transform the value for this particular pipe. We only want to transform the value to a boolean if the type is query and the meta type is boolean. So if type equals query and meta type equals boolean, then we want to return, and we're gonna check for the value as well. If it has value, then we return value equals true or no, so that it can be null. If it doesn't pass the condition, just return the value without transforming. So our pipe is done. Now let's go back to the controller. In the second argument of the query for is completed, let's pass in a new toBoolean pipe. And now let's try it out with Swagger. Let's rerun our application. Let's refresh, and pick true, then hit execute. Cool, it's boolean. False. Alright, it is boolean type now, so our pipes work. Let's start implementing it. First, we're going to check for is completed, is not null. Remember, it can be null. So we have to check for not null. If you just use is completed, it's always going to be true or false. So let's check for null as well. And we're going to have to check for the level key on filter object. If there's already level, we're going to reassign filter to an object with an operator. And the first object is going to be level, filter level, and the second object is going to be is completed. So that is it checks for both filter, it checks for both query. And if filter level is not there, it just is completed. Now filter is done. Let's rerun our application. Let's refresh. Now let's try out. Let's execute first without any filter. So we have low false and high in false. Let's try false. We have 3 to-dos. So it means true returns 1 to-do. Alright, so let's combine these. Let's switch to false and put in high. Should return 1, high false. And let's add in low. We get 2 now. Normal. Cool, great. Alright, so filtering is working, CRUD is working. Now we want to protect it. So to protect our application, we're going to use a rows decorator and a rows guard. So the business logic is that we only expose the to-do to authenticated user, logged in user, and all users can get an update, but only admin users can create and delete to-do. So let's go back to VS Code, start the server, and under share, let's add a decorators directory and a guards directory. Under decorators, we're gonna need a rows.decorator.ts, and under guards, we're gonna need a rows.guard.ts. So for decorator, it's gonna be a const, so export const rows, and it's going to be a function that takes in a rows values of type user row array, and it's going to return a reflect metadata, and the key is rows and the value is the rows values. And that's how easy it is to create a custom decorator. Now let's go to rows guard. So guard is just a class, export class rows guard. It implements can activate, and can activate makes sure that this class implement a can activate method, and it has access to the context, the execution context. It returns a boolean, a promise of boolean, or an observable of boolean. And for this one, we're going to need the injectable, so we can inject the reflector. So first of all, we're going to get the rows value from the decorator using the reflector. So we call reflector get, and it's going to be an array of user row. And let's import the user row. The key is rows, and we're going to get it from the handler. So the handler is the route handler that we're targeting, and we're going to check if rows is null or length of rows is 0, then we return true. It means it passed the guard. Next, we're going to get the request. This is the request object of a route handler. So we're going to use the rows guard in combination with the auth guard. So the auth guard will check for any logged in user. If there's a user logged in, it's going to append that user to the request object. So we have request.user, and that's how Passport does it. So this rows guard is going to have access to the request user, and if there's no user logged in, the auth guard is going to stop the request right there. So in rows guard, we can just get the user from the request. Now we're going to have a function has role. It's going to return a boolean, and we're going to check for if the user role has the role in the rows array, and we use the index of. Now we check if their user. We're going to recheck if their user role and has row is true. Then it passes the guard. We return true. Else we're just gonna throw an exception, and you do not have permission. You can pass in whatever you want to. It's gonna be unauthorized status. That's it. Our guard is done. Now let's go back to our controller. First, we're gonna decorate the whole class with API bearer off, so that it notifies Swagger that this controller is protected. For create, we're gonna need a rows user admin, and we're gonna copy this on the delete. And for get and update, admin and user both can access that. Now we're gonna add a use guards decorator on all of the handlers. And authguard, we pass in JWT, we're using JSON Web Token, and the authguard is from the NestJS Passport. So we pass that for all of the handlers. And now our authentication system is in place. So let's restart our application. And let's see it in action using Swagger UI. Let's give it a refresh. Alright, now you can see that these to-dos routes has a lock. It means that it's protected. You can try calling a get request, and you will get an unauthorized error with the message that you set. And also same with create, you get an unauthorized. Alright, so go ahead and create yourself some users. I just wiped my database, so I'm gonna create myself some users as well, and make one of them admin. So first, let's create a user. It's gonna be like really simple. It's gonna be my name, and this guy is a user. Next, I'm gonna create another one, and because we do not allow any option to switch the user role, so we're gonna have to access the database using Compass, using Studio 3T or Robot 3T to manually edit that. I'm gonna use Studio 3T. Let's use whatever you want or whatever you have. Because we're using a local, so we have to use that. If you use MLab, you can go to MLab and edit that view. Now just refresh my collection. That's my to-dos, and now my users. I'm gonna edit this guy to admin. Alright, now I have one user and one admin. I'm gonna log in as a user first. Alright, so login. Let's grab the token and just click on the lock and pass in bearer and the token. and click authorize. Now you logged in. That's exactly how you would do it on the front end. You pass in the authorization header. Now you can get as a user, and the filters works. You can get and you can update. So I'm gonna try updating a to-do right now. Let's pick a false one, the one with the completed status false, and let's update that. It's gonna be updated and execute. I can access the update route. Now choose should have two because I just updated that field, to do. But I cannot create as a user. I get an unauthorized rows, so that the rows gar throw that exception. Now let's log in as an admin, but we have to log out first. So log out and log in with your admin user. Let's grab the token. It's going to be the same process again. Authorize yourself. Now let's try create it as admin. There we go. New to do is created. Now let's get everything. Create it as admin. I'm gonna get the updated or the third to do, and I'm gonna update it as an admin. Let's pass in the ID and keep everything the same and update it as admin. It went through. Now I'm gonna delete the same to do again. Pass in the ID and update it as admin has been deleted. Let's double check. Updated as admin has gone. We have created as admin, but updated as admin has been deleted. Right, so now our backend is done, our routes is protected, the authentication authorization system works. So in the next video, I'm gonna start implementing the Angular front end, and it's gonna be brief. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.